If you're getting into Unreal Engine, Blender, or any kind of 3D work, sooner or later you hit the same question. What PC do I actually need for this? Do you need an expensive Mac? Is a budget PC enough? And which parts really matter when it comes to performance? In this video, I'm breaking down budget and high-end PC builds for Unreal Engine, where your money actually makes a difference, and how to avoid wasting cash on parts that won't help your work at all. While this video isn't sponsored, I do want to let you know there's a Black Friday sale going on from Liardi's studio. You can get 47 premium packs worth $6,627 for just $39. Just make sure to use the BF60 discount code before you check out. The link is in the description. Let's start with a question that comes up all the time. Mac or PC? Here's the honest answer. If you build a $1,500 to $2,000 PC, it will usually outperform a $2,000 to $3,000 Mac when it comes to 3D work. For Unreal Engine, real-time rendering, ray tracing, and heavy scenes, PCs simply give you more performance for the money. So if you're building a new system or planning an upgrade, a PC just makes more sense for Unreal Engine and serious 3D work. Now let's talk about the part that matters the most, the graphics card. Whether you're using Unreal Engine, Blender, or Cinema 4D, the GPU has the biggest impact on how your system actually performs. If your budget is tight, this is where most of your money should go. A good rule to follow is this: try to spend around 40 to 50% of your total budget on the GPU, but balance is important. If you buy a powerful graphics card and pair it with a weak CPU or not enough RAM, that GPU will never reach its full potential. So the goal isn't just a strong GPU, it's a balanced system. For example, if you're buying an RTX 5080, don't pair it with a weak CPU like the Intel Ultra 285K. You'll end up bottlenecking the GPU. A much better option would be something like the Ryzen 9950X. Now, some of you might be thinking about the 9950X 3D, but the 3D in the name doesn't mean it's better for 3D work. That X3D chip is mainly designed for gaming, where the extra cache helps boost frame rates, not for rendering or heavy production workloads. Now, some of AMD femboys might want to argue why I'm not mentioning AMD graphics card, but for 3D work and Unreal Engine, NVIDIA is generally the safer option. Things like CUDA support, optics denoising in Blender, and more mature ray tracing features give NVIDIA a clear edge in professional 3D workflows. That's why, if your budget allows, I usually recommend going with an NVIDIA GPU. Next up is RAM. If you're working with large scenes, complex animations, or open worlds, RAM becomes very important. Here's a realistic breakdown. 16 gigabytes is the minimum. 32 gigabytes is the sweet spot. I personally use 64 gigs, and even on large projects, memory is rarely an issue. For most people, going beyond that just isn't necessary. Right now, DDR5 RAM prices are really high, and getting 64 gigs of RAM is pretty expensive. I've also been hearing rumors that China is mass-producing DDR5 RAM, and hopefully that stock will hit the global market soon so prices can stabilize. Now let's talk about the CPU. The CPU does matter, but for Unreal Engine and real-time work, it's still not as critical as the GPU. Earlier, I mentioned Intel Ultra 285K is weak while talking about a high-end GPU, and I want to be clear about what I mean by that. I don't mean the CPU itself is bad, I mean it's a weak pairing for that level of GPU. If you're buying a high-end graphics card, you need a CPU that can actually keep up, otherwise you'll bottleneck the system. So don't overspend on the processor, but don't go too low end either. A simple rule is to look up your GPU and see which CPUs are commonly paired with it. That way, your system stays balanced and Unreal runs smoothly without leaving performance on the table. Now, if you're on a budget and just getting started with Unreal Engine, this is a solid baseline build. For the GPU, the absolute minimum I'd recommend is an RTX 4060. If you can stretch a bit more, the RTX 5060 Ti is a much better long-term option. On the CPU side, pair that with something like a Ryzen 5 7600 or a Ryzen 7 7700. These CPUs are strong enough to keep up with those GPUs and won't bottleneck Unreal during real-time work. For RAM, 16 gigs is the bare minimum, but I'd strongly recommend starting with 32 gigs if your budget allows. Unreal eats memory very quickly, especially once your scenes get more complex. This kind of setup is affordable, balanced, and more than capable of learning Unreal Engine, working with Nanite, Lumen, and building real projects without constant performance issues. For a proper high-end Unreal Engine build, The GPU does the heavy lifting. An RTX 5090 is where most of your real-time performance comes from. Pair it with a Ryzen 9 9950X so the CPU can keep up without bottlenecking shader compiles or lighting builds. If you're on Intel, the same rule applies. Pair it with a genuinely high-end CPU, not a mid-range chip, or you'll choke the GPU. 64 gigs of DDR5 is the bare minimum here, but 128 gigs is the smarter target for large scenes. This setup is built for serious Unreal work, not just benchmarks. Alright, now let's talk about a real high-end Unreal Engine workstation, not a YouTube high-end build. I'm talking studio-level hardware. If you're working on massive worlds, heavy Nanite scenes, virtual production, or cinematic pipelines, this is where Threadripper actually makes sense. On the CPU side, something like an AMD Threadripper Pro. This gives you an insane core count, massive memory bandwidth, and the ability to scale Unreal without the system falling apart under load. Paired with that, an RTX A6000 is an absolute monster for professional Unreal work. The huge VRAM buffer alone makes a massive difference when you're dealing with large assets, complex lighting, and real-time rendering at scale. This kind of setup isn't about chasing frame rates, it's about stability, consistency, and being able to iterate fast without crashes, stutters, or memory limits slowing you down. For memory, this class of machine really shines with well over 64 gigs of DDR5 ECC RAM, especially once your projects start getting serious. So yes, a Threadripper paired with an A6000 is not just a good build. It's the kind of rig professionals use when Unreal Engine is part of a real production pipeline, not just a hobby. I know RAM prices are really high right now, but if you can't afford a new PC, don't stop learning. Even on a slower system, you can still learn video editing, pick up the basics of Blender, and understand Unreal Engine workflows. Skills always come first. Hardware can be upgraded later. If you're planning a PC build or thinking about upgrading what you already have, and you're not sure what actually makes sense for your workload, drop your questions in the comments. Tell me your budget, the kind of work you want to do in Unreal, and what hardware you're currently on. I go through the comments and I reply, because the goal here isn't hype. It's helping you build something that actually works for you. Build smart, upgrade when it makes sense, and I'll see you in the next one.